He was the king of a rich and dazzling city, part of a whole world of kingdoms that traded and prospered together. Then strange ships appeared on the horizon, and a darkness began to spread across every land at once. From his burning palace he sent one last desperate letter, begging a distant king for help that would never come. His great city fell, and unlike so many others, it would never be rebuilt or rise again. Within a single lifetime, the whole shining world he had known collapsed into fire, silence, and ruin. This is the story of the losing side. To understand how an entire civilized world could die at once, you have to see how bright it had become. Around 3,000 years ago, the lands around the eastern Mediterranean shone in a golden age of bronze. Great powers rose together. The pharaohs of Egypt, the kings of the Hittites, and the warlords of Mycenaean Greece. Their kings called one another brothers, exchanging gifts, gold, and marriages across thousands of miles of land and sea. Merchant ships crossed the waves loaded with copper, tin, ivory, and jars of wine and fragrant oil. It was an age of writing and palaces, of trade and treaties binding distant peoples into one connected world. And at the heart of that trade, on the coast of Syria, stood one of its richest jewels. This was the kingdom of Ugarit, a busy harbor where the goods and languages of every nation met. In Ugarit's crowded port, ships from Egypt, Cyprus, and the Aegean unloaded their cargoes side by side. Its scribes wrote in many tongues and used one of the world's first alphabets, simple signs pressed into clay. The city grew fat on trade, its palace piled with treasure, its warehouses stuffed with grain and metal. Over this glittering kingdom ruled its last king, a man named Ammurapi. He had inherited a wealthy and ancient throne, bound by oath as a loyal vassal of the mighty Hittite Empire. To Ammurapi, as to every king of his age, this prosperous world must have seemed like it would last forever. But the brilliance of that world hid a deadly weakness, for every kingdom now depended on all the others. Bronze itself, the metal of their tools and weapons, needed copper and tin carried from far-off distant lands. Great cities that could not feed themselves survived on grain shipped across the sea from foreign harvests. Kings relied on distant allies, on trade routes, and on tribute flowing in from lands they did not rule. It was a web of connection, and a web can be torn apart if enough of its threads are cut. Then, in the years around this time, the threads began to snap, one after another. The climate seems to have turned against them, bringing years of drought, failed harvests, and creeping famine. Hunger bred anger, and anger bred unrest, as starving people turned against the kings who could not feed them. Earthquakes struck city after city, toppling proud walls and palaces that had stood for centuries. And along the coasts and roads there rose a new and terrifying danger, moving from land to land. Whole peoples, uprooted from their homes, were on the move, searching for somewhere new to live. The Egyptians would remember them with dread and give them a single haunting name: the Sea Peoples. No one is fully certain who they were, or exactly where this great tide of wanderers first came from. They may have been refugees, raiders, and broken armies, driven from failing lands by hunger and war. They came by sea in ships and by land in slow columns, dragging their wives, children, and oxen with them. Wherever they passed, they fell upon the rich cities of the old world, burning and plundering as they went. One by one, the great kingdoms began to feel the storm battering against their borders. The Hittite Empire, Ugarit's mighty overlord, was already weakened by famine and struggling to feed its people. Its last great king begged Ugarit to send grain, ships, and soldiers to help hold the crumbling realm together. And so, at the worst possible moment, Ammurapi was ordered to strip his own kingdom of its defenses. If the fall of an entire world moves you, take 1 second to subscribe and stand with its last king. Obedient to his Hittite masters, Ammurapi sent his army away to the north and his fleet away to the west. His warships sailed off to patrol distant coasts, and his soldiers marched away to defend a foreign land. So when the danger finally turned toward Ugarit itself, the great trading city stood almost defenseless. Watchmen on the shore saw them first. Enemy ships appearing like shadows on the open sea. A frightened message came from the king of Cyprus, warning that raiders were already near the coast. In his palace, Ammurapi took up his stylus and clay and dictated a letter heavy with despair. "My father," he wrote to the distant king, "the enemy ships are here, and they have burned my towns. My army is in the land of the Hittites," he pleaded, "and all my ships are away in the west. The country is abandoned to itself," he confessed, "and we are left helpless before them." It was a cry for help sent out across the sea to a world that could no longer answer, for every other king was facing the same storm, and none had ships or soldiers to spare. The letter was pressed into clay and set aside, waiting for a messenger who may never have sailed. And then the blow fell upon Ugarit with all its fury. The enemy came from the sea and the land together, swarming toward the walls of the undefended city. There were too few soldiers left to hold them, and the harbor lay open to the raiders. They stormed into the streets, and the great trading city was given over to fire and the sword. The palace where kings had ruled for centuries was plundered, shattered, and left to burn. The flames roared so fiercely through the archives that they baked Ammurapi's last letters hard in the clay. When the fires at last died down, Ugarit was a smoking ruin, its people scattered or dead. And this time, the city did not recover, for no one ever came back to rebuild it. The great harbor fell silent, and the sand slowly buried the palace, the streets, and the king's last words. Ammurapi vanishes from history in that fire. The last king of a kingdom that simply ceased to be. But Ugarit was only one voice in a chorus of dying cities across the whole eastern world. Far to the north, the Hittite capital of Hattusa was abandoned and burned, its empire crumbling into nothing. Across the sea in Greece, the mighty palaces of the Mycenaeans were sacked and set ablaze one by one. Their towering fortresses fell empty, and the very art of their writing was forgotten within a generation. City after city, from Anatolia to Canaan, was reduced to rubble in the space of a few short decades. Only Egypt survived the onslaught, and even mighty Egypt was left battered, shrunken, and never truly the same. In little more than a single lifetime, a whole interconnected world had collapsed into ash. The great web of trade was broken, and the copper and tin for bronze stopped flowing across the sea. The palaces that had ruled and fed the people were gone, and with them the order they had kept. The scribes fell silent, their scripts forgotten, and much of the world simply stopped writing anything down. A darkness settled over the eastern Mediterranean, a silence that would last for centuries. Populations crashed as famine, war, and chaos emptied the once crowded cities and fields. The survivors scattered into small villages, poorer and fewer, their grandparents' glory now only a fading memory. The names of the old kings and their deeds were lost, remembered only in half-mythical songs and legends. It was one of the greatest collapses in all of human history, an entire age wiped away. And to this day, no one can say for certain exactly why it all fell apart so completely. Perhaps it was drought, or earthquakes, or invasion, or rebellion, or all of these at once. Most likely it was the web itself, so connected that when one part failed, it dragged down all the rest. Yet, out of that long darkness in time, new and smaller peoples slowly began to rise. The traders of the coast, whom we call the Phoenicians, carried the old alphabet out into the world. From those simple signs, once pressed into clay in cities like Ugarit, would grow the letters we still use today. New kingdoms, new peoples, and later the Greeks would build a fresh world upon the buried ruins of the old. But the shining Bronze Age world of Ammurapi was gone forever, lost beneath the dust of ages. For 3,000 years his final letters lay buried in the ashes, unread and unanswered. When archaeologists at last dug them out, they read again the desperate words of a doomed king. The enemy ships are here, and my country is abandoned. Help me before the darkness comes. This has been the story of the losing side.